Good luck and thank you. Okay, the webinar has started. Everybody should be leaving the waiting room and do me a favor, people joining us. Just if you're not seeing anything, or if you are seeing something, that's probably a better way to do this. Just let us know in the chat that everything's coming through okay. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Kaladin Myers. I'm the founder and executive director of ProRep Coalition, the organization hosting this webinar today. ProRep Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit working to enable multi-party democracy in California through education and coalition building for proportional representation. Joining us today to discuss the recent wildfires in Los Angeles are California's 6 alternative parties. Scratch that, 4, because 2 couldn't make it today. And these 4, in addition to 2 other alternative parties, I'm proud to share, are also part of our coalition. Um, we decided to host this webinar for a few reasons, but mainly because we've come to realize that while each of these parties holds at times dramatically different policy preferences and ideologies, we all agree on one thing. Our politics are broken, and we need a more responsive and representative political system, one that acknowledges our differences and enables us to harness them by incentivizing compromise and coalition building. What we have now with our two-party system is toxically oversimplified representation that incentivizes conflict and division. Our politics, preferences, and the distribution of power has been reduced to a zero-sum binary. Whichever policy one party supports, the other automatically opposes. That's how our system is designed to function. It forces all of our ideological and racial diversity into two increasingly opposed political groups and pits us against each other in a never ending battle of government control. And as a result, at the national level, trust in government is hovering near an all-time low of 22%. 71% of Americans feel our political system doesn't allow them to influence politics, and 85% of Americans believe major political reform is needed. As for California, the wildfires in Los Angeles recently put the issues with our political system on full display. Democrats and Republicans have spent the last few weeks pointing their fingers at one another, searching to spin the natural disaster into some sort of political fortune. And yet, unfortunately, no matter the exact circumstances or policies that may have contributed to these fires, we need to acknowledge that we'll have more megafires in California in the coming decades. They'll be worse than those in the past, and we need to work together to champion new and innovative policies, methods, and systems to defend ourselves from this growing threat. So today we hope to provide a little bit of what feels missing from the toxic political moment we've found ourselves in, a healthy exchange of ideas and policy proposals from political parties that recognize their differences and are committed to working together to improve the safety of Californians. Before proceeding, on behalf of ProRep Coalition and all our partners, allow me to express our deepest sympathies for anyone affected by the LA wildfires. Our thoughts are with you and your communities as they recover. For those of you joining us today that are able to support some of the families and communities affected by the fires, we encourage you to make a donation to the California Fire Foundation's Disaster Relief Program, which we'll share the link to in the chat briefly, and try to open up as well. I see we're getting messages about people not being able to chat. But without further ado, allow me to introduce our panelists today. Representing the Green Party of California is David Cobb. Representing the Peace and Freedom Party of California is Aaron Reveles. Unfortunately, the folks from the Libertarian Party and California National Party couldn't make it, but we are also joined by Sarah Check, representing the Forward Party of California, and Mark Ruzon, representing the American Solidarity Party. Here's how this is going to go. We'll be asking two questions. One about California's fire mitigation and management practices, and the other about how California can effectively provide insurance to homeowners as more and more private insurance companies leave the state. Each party and panelist will have around 3 or 4 minutes to answer each question, and I'll provide a 30-second notice when your time is coming to an end. And unless there's any questions from the panelists, we'll get underway. So, first question. California has one of the largest and best trained firefighting departments in the world. Yet, largely due to climate change, wildfires are growing larger and more difficult to manage year after year. Over the next few decades, California is projected to see a dramatic increase in the severity and frequency of these megafires. First up, David Cobb of the Green Party of California. Which policies does your party propose to mitigate and manage the growing threat of wildfire?
Thank you, Colin. It is my pleasure to be with you. I join you in sending love, support to the families and people who have been impacted by this. I've just shared on the screen the Green Party of California's statement, which for those who are watching, you'll be able to read it. For those who are only listening to the podcast version, I'll read it aloud. These wildfires have been driven by climate disruption and corporate greed, enabled by a capitalist system that places profit before the needs of people and nature. Profit-driven energy and water systems are now producing catastrophic crises on an almost weekly basis. Our California forests have suffered decades of drought, triggered by for-profit fossil fuel and other industries which refuse to use ecologically sound and sustainable business practices, as well as sources of energy. Highly fire-prone conditions have combined with urban overdevelopment driven by private real estate profiteers that ignore the interest of working Californians who need affordable, safe, rent-controlled housing now. Corporate influenced governments have underfunded and undermined agencies responsible for preventing and responding to these fires. So that's the formal Green Party of California position. And I'll take this moment as a representative of an unapologetically eco-socialist political party to say capitalism is driving this ecological crisis, and only if and when we, the people and ordinary folks, come together and take control of our government as we, the people, are we going to be able to address the root causes. And let's be crystal clear that humans have been living in what we now call California since time immemorial. Indigenous practices of traditional ecological knowledge have always understood that fire is actually part of this landscape, and they stewarded fire as well as were in right relation with other animals and ecosystems. And it is the Green Party of California's position and my position that we need to learn from that and shift away from the power over dominator system that is represented by the two capitalist parties of the Democratic and Republican Party and move into a indigenous understanding of right relationship. We call it eco-socialism, but it could be called anything else. Thank you, Kaladin.
Thank you, David. Next up, Aaron Ravelas. Can you please share which policies your party proposes to mitigate and manage the growing threat of wildfires?
Yeah, thank you, Calvin. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Ravelis. I'm from the Peace of Freedom Party. I live in Los Angeles, and I participated in helping out during the events after the fire, making sure people had supplies, hygiene, water, all that good stuff. But as for our party, we agree a lot with what David Cobb said and the Green Party does. We agree with them a lot of the time. That's why we run candidates together a lot of the time. But we believe that we need like green infrastructure and climate resilience. We need to invest in fire-resistant infrastructure, helping people retrofit their houses so it's a fire-resistant material. We need to invest in community fire breaks and microgrids so that not only when to help prevent fires, but if they do happen, we can make sure people's refrigerators are still running so that their medicine is staying good, that hospitals can keep running when there's fires going to kind of curb some of the dangers that happen during a fire. But we also need to expand urban tree cover and wetland restoration across the county. We've had a history of not giving urban tree cover to the more working class communities in Los Angeles. When this urban tree cover and could, if we put climate fire resistant trees, it would help us create a natural fire break. We need to strengthen our firefighter and emergency response. We need to end our exploitation of prison labor by offering prisoners these full wages and pathways to professional firefighting careers. So that way we can bolster our forces when these fires actually happen. We need to defund money away from the police and invest in our firefighters. Because when some of our party members were going out and clearing debris from Pasadena, we had the police and the National Guard standing guard, just watching for these fake criminals that the mayor and a bunch of Republicans were saying that they were looting houses, but there was no one looting houses. It was just a National Guard with their weapons watching our party members going out and cleaning debris and helping people with the fires. So we need to take money away from just the police standing around watching us and give it to the firefighters so they can more effectively fight the fires. We need to get rid of our corporate control over energy and water. Right now, PG&E and Edison have been seen at fault of creating not only this fire, but several fires in the past because they don't spend the money to upkeep their power grid because that increases their profits, but it causes fires that they get away with, that they get no blame put on them. So we need to transition those companies into utilities that are owned by the people and by California, so that we can prioritize upgrading our systems, keeping them safe, and adapting them to be more climate friendly to our state in California. We also had a problem where there wasn't enough water to fight our fire. So we need to end the privatization of water in our state and ensure public control over our water resources so we can have access to them in emergency conditions. But also we need to tackle climate change at its root. It's not enough just to make better protections against these dangers when they happen, but we need to switch to a 100% renewable, publicly owned renewable energy so we can stop or slow down climate change and implement a green jobs program that will train employees and workers in sustainable forestry, ecological restoration, and clean energy industries. So not only it would help prevent these fires, but also make sure that these fires don't become worse in the future. And finally, we just need to come together. I think everyone here on this call would agree that we need to take power away from the Democratic Party. They have shown that their interests are with corporations, with landlords, who they rather let and water oligarchs and landlords make millions while our fires burn us down. They did nothing to stop the price gouging of rents. They had no relief for the people who lost their homes, who lost their jobs, while it was us socialists, us progressives, and other community organizations who filled in when the Democratic Party, who has state power, offered little to those affected by the fire. They were the ones asking us for masks. We were the ones that were going out and making sure different distribution centers had water, snacks, hygiene, Pampers for babies, while the Democratic Party was sitting with their hands in their pockets, wondering what they can do. The mayor was in a different country, and the governor of the California was bragging about how he's already envisioning Los Angeles 2.0. Forget all the people who lost their homes. He was already wondering how he could make him and his friends money off of rebuilding Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Really interesting and eye-opening to get a boots on the ground perspective of some of what was happening in LA over the last few weeks. So, thank you. Mark, which policies does the American Solidarity Party propose to mitigate and manage the growing threat of wildfires? You're on mute.
Thank you, Calvin. It's great to be here. My name is Mark Gruzon. I am the former state chair, former U.S. Senate candidate, and current secretary of the American Solidarity Party here in California. Many of you probably have not heard of us, so I will just say briefly that among the many core principles of the American Solidarity Party is a commitment to the inviolable dignity of all humans. We believe that people have a dignity that cannot be taken away from them based on who they are, where they're from, or even what they've done in their life. For this reason, we are the only, sadly, remaining pro-life party in America today. And wildfires are definitely a pro-life issue. The American Solidarity Party has another principle that's related to this called subsidiarity. And the idea behind subsidiarity is that problems ought to be handled at the level in which it makes the most sense for it to be the lowest level for which it makes sense to handle the problem. California takes a very paternalistic view of many functions in government, CAL FIRE being one of them. The approach of CAL FIRE is that we're the experts. You guys don't know anything, so we're going to handle everything, and you just sit around and do what we tell you to do. In other places where wildfires are common, such as Oregon and Washington, the state governments there take a more measured approach. They actually engage their citizens. You could think of them as being sheriff's deputies, only for fire, where people are empowered to learn about how fire works and to be able to respond and be part of the system. They might not be going out and actually fighting fires, but there's still plenty of things that they can do. And as individual landowners in rural areas, they are highly motivated to do the work needed to make sure that fires are prevented and found quickly so that they can be put out. And so we need to do that. I just got an email from my state senator yesterday saying how they doubled CAL FIRE's appropriations for this year. And that's a typical Democrat way of solving problems. Is let's just keep doing the same thing over and over with more tax money. More money is great, but as we've seen in the school system, just pumping more money into the system without changing how you do things doesn't necessarily get you better results. And that's true in fire as well. So we'd like to see more people be involved at the citizen level in fire prevention and management. And that will help everything from warnings and alerts to being able to spot fires and put them out more quickly.
Thank you, Mark. Next up, Sarah, which policies does the Forward Party of California propose to mitigate and manage the growing threat of wildfires?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First off, hello, everyone. I'm so excited and honored to be here this evening representing the Forward Party of California. My name is Sarah. I'm a volunteer and the Forward Party of California policy coordinator. A little bit about us. The Forward Party is a national movement that's looking to bring more choice to Americans across the country and has already done so by supporting and endorsing more than 125 candidates across the nation. The Forward Party believes in a grassroots, bottom-up approach to party building and platform building. And so every state has their own party that is being formed to address the specific needs of that state. And here in California, we plan to do that by blazing the trail for a competitive multi-party democracy in California through electing representatives at all levels that are responsible, responsive, accountable, transparent, and honest, and by advocating for pragmatic, data-driven solutions that actually better the lives of our communities. So to address the current question, there are several points that I want to make. First, we all bear responsibility for the protection of our communities. We need to adapt to the changing landscape of our longer fire season and what that means for our state, which will take collective action from all of us. And this includes creating better fire mitigation strategies in our communities, supporting more full-time firefighters in our cities to account for our lengthened fire season, and utilization of the best of our technology to detect fires early. Second, Californians continue to pay the price for wildfires across the state through loss of life and property increased utility rates, less insurance options, and a worsening housing crisis. Accountability must be demanded of our utility companies, particularly to modernize their infrastructure, which they are so often behind on, without passing the bills on to consumers. The issue of undergrounding power lines has come up quite a lot lately, and it is important to mention as one example of how our utility companies can and should update their infrastructure in fire-prone areas. There are other more cost-effective improvements that can be made, however, like insulating conductors and installing fire-resistant metal poles in areas where undergrounding may be impractical. One of the Ford Party's foundational values is campaign finance reform, which can include reforms like better regulating independent expenditures. And with campaigns overwhelmingly funded by special interests, those with the deepest pockets, like California utility companies, are calling the shots, making it harder for meaningful reform, like barring utility companies from using ratepayer funds from lobbying efforts to get passed. According to the Solar Rights Alliance, utility companies in California have spent more than $1 billion since 2000 on direct campaign contributions, lobbying efforts, and more. And the Ford Party of California believes that special interests should have less control over legislation in our state, and that campaign finance reform is absolutely key to leveling the playing field of special interests in our state. Third, we cannot continue to make the same mistakes. We know that building into the wildland urban interface puts communities at risk, and that since 2020, nearly 14 million Californians live in the 7 million acre zone, which is especially susceptible to fire. We also know that certain wildfire suppression tactics have threatened our communities with the buildup of fuel, and we know that we cannot rebuild the same way. We must support housing reform that allows the building of incremental housing in our cities to bridge the widening housing gap and stop expansion into the wildland urban interface. The Ford Party of California ultimately believes that we can address the wildfire epidemic by working together and tackling the issue with local and statewide reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all the other panelists for their thoughtful answers. It's quite fascinating to hear such similarities and differences on the different takes to wildfire prevention, mitigation, and management. And I look forward to those similarities and differences in the next question too. So, moving on, when it comes to insurance coverage, as wildfires get worse, a vicious cycle is emerging in California. More insurers are leaving the state, pushing more homeowners toward the FAIR plan, which is the state insurer of last resort, which is less able to cover claims after each new disaster, leading to more assessments on regular insurers and pushing them out of the state even faster. So in sum, as fires are getting worse, our state-based insurance plan of last resort will become increasingly strained. While as of yesterday, the state actually received a $1 billion bailout to support those affected by the LA fires. If another major disaster happens to occur over the next few months, the state may not have the funds available to cover homeowners' losses, which has the potential to significantly harm California's economy. So, David, once again, I'll start with the Green Party. How does the Green Party propose providing coverage to Californians living in high-risk areas as the threat of wildfires grows?
So I'm going to answer this question as David Cobb, Green Party activist. If you'll remember before, I made it very clear this is the Green Party of California's position. As a decentralized party that takes democracy very seriously internally, I am obliged to say what I'm about to say is me. Now, I am the co-founder of the Green Party of Texas. I was the Attorney General for Texas in 2002. I was the Green Party nominee for President of the United States in 2004. I managed the Stein-Baraka campaign in 2016. So I have deep roots within the Green Party. I feel very confident in telling you that most Greens would agree with this, but I'm going to take head on this question and give a socialist critique of fire insurance itself, because the way that fire insurance is operating is to commodify protection from disaster. It prioritizes profit over human well-being and should be replaced by a full publicly funded system that guarantees fire protection and recovery for all, regardless of wealth. Fire insurance reinforces class inequality because it operates on a for-profit basis, which means those who can afford higher premiums get better coverage. But wait, there's more, because profit-driven risk assessment is leading to racial discrimination, not just working class neighborhoods, but very specifically marginalized communities. Factors such as historical fire rates, building materials, urban density are all used to justify charging poor communities and people of color way higher premiums than they should. Third, the insurance encourages the privatization of fire services themselves, and it's fueling the argument for privatized fire production where only those who pay are fully protected. The alternative is a public fire protection and recovery system. It would be universal, fully funded by a progressive taxation system. Ultimately, we are eco-socialist and we believe that we need to dismantle capitalism as an economic system. We need stronger public investment in fire prevention. We need to completely eliminate the profit motive to ensure that resources are directed toward the fire safety rather than corporate gains. I'll conclude with this. Fire insurance is absolutely an unnecessary, flawed market-based solution to a problem that should be addressed through collective socialist action. We argue that fire protection and disaster recovery should be human rights, not privileges determined by financial means. Abolishing fire insurance and replacing it with a public system can ensure that all people are protected from fire, regardless of their income or class status.
Thank you, David. Aaron, moving on to you and the Peace and Freedom Party. How does the Peace and Freedom Party propose providing fire insurance coverage to Californians living in high-risk areas as the threat of wildfires grows?
Well, because Peace and Freedom Party is also a socialist party, David Cobb kind of stole all my thunder. Again, we agree very similarly. That's why we run candidates together a lot of the time during the state elections. But just to kind of go back off of like what I prepared, uh, just like what David Cobb said, we need to transition to a publicly funded single payer insurance system for the state of California. We believe this with car insurance, with medical insurance. We pay too much in cost and premiums to get very little in return for all of these types of insurance systems. We want to provide this insurance to anyone for any kind of fire or disaster, ensuring all homeowners and renters, regardless of income or location, are protected. This would end our reliance on private insurances that abandon communities uh, or drastically raise their rates when this disaster does happen. We would fund this through a progressive taxation on big real estate developers, fossil fuel corporations, and insurance companies that have contributed to this climate crisis and rising disaster risks themselves. And we would redirect our state subsidies and emergency bailouts from private insurance to this publicly managed insurance system so we can put people over profits. And then also use some of this money from this progressive taxation to incentivize fire resilient housing and community protection. We could use some of this money to provide grants and subsidies so homeowners could fireproof their properties with heat resistant materials, defensible space, and climate resilient designs. And it would also open up funding for community fire protection programs that could have local emergency response teams to be used when these disasters happen. And then we ultimately, just like the Green Party, we believe that we need to just end this disaster capitalism because they use these disasters to go in and buy up whatever was destroyed and rebuild on it and sell it at a higher price. We see these insurance companies are dropping their coverage so they can profit off only safe regions where they have to pay out very little. And we need to eventually phase out these companies by implementing state regulated premium caps so they can't price gouge and ensure that working class families in fire prone regions are not pushed to financial ruin. So our vision at the Peace and Freedom Party is believe that fire protection and disaster insurance are public goods. These should not be commodities. So we need to shift control away from these corporations into the hands of the people so we can ensure all Californians, regardless of their wealth or location, have the security and support they need to face these worsening wildfires and also worsening disasters that keep coming up due to climate change.
Thank you, Aaron. Mark, how does the American Solidarity Party propose providing fire insurance coverage to Californians living in high-risk areas as the threat of wildfires grow?
Well, so let's just look at the math of insurance. There's a certain amount of risk that a fire is going to take out your house, or that you're going to need a lung transplant, and that this risk is just a mathematical number. When the risk becomes too high, insurance simply doesn't make sense, and so we have to accept that with climate change, which the American Solidarity Party also believes very strongly that we should address at its root causes. I'm actually quite unhappy with actions taken by the Trump administration to move us backwards away from solving climate change. But the point is that we have to adapt to the Earth that we have right now, and if it's simply too risky to build in a place or to rebuild in a place, then we simply can't insure. And it doesn't matter whether it's private or public. If the risk is higher than the likelihood of the payout over the time period, then we're simply not going to be able to pay that. So rather than telling people, yes, you can have whatever you want and you can build wherever you want, people are going to have to accept the fact that they simply don't have, if they can't get insurance, that they're simply going to have to self-insure. I am in favor of, just like in healthcare, we do emergency services for people whether or not they have insurance. We don't ask them, do you have insurance first before we help you. We're willing, and we spend lots of money on insurance for healthcare for poor people who don't have their own insurance. We can do something similar in the fire sense, meaning that if you aren't able to insure your home and it does burn in a fire, then the state can compensate you at least to a level where you can pick up and move on. But to simply say that we should insure everybody at all costs, no matter where they live in the state or no matter what the fire risk is there, is simply not tenable. And so we have to apply common good, common ground, and common sense approach to the math that goes along with fire insurance.
Thank you, Mark. Sarah, how does the Forward Party of California propose providing fire insurance coverage to Californians living in high-risk areas as the threat of wildfires grows?
Absolutely. First off, just want to say I'm so excited to hear that we all have talked about root causes of these issues. I think that's really great. Very refreshing. So first off, I just want to note that the Forward Party of California believes that competition in all markets is very important. And not only should Californians have more political party options, but they should have more home and fire insurance options too. Competition can bring down costs and allow Californians to select insurers that better meet their needs. California's Department of Insurance exists as a consumer protection agency to regulate the nation's largest insurance market. And we do support the department's recent push for catastrophe modeling and rate making and utilizing the best and most sophisticated technology possible to create more accurate and effective rates. We also support the public collaboration that took place through the California Department of Insurance to solicit public input in this important issue. We believe this will bring more competition and options into the market, helping communities receive insurance that better meets their needs, and we stand by the incorporation of scientific data to better understand risk reduction. We also believe that this will have a positive secondary effect as well, like updated legislation and regulations around land use and permitting, defensible space, and less encroachment into the wildland-urban interface, which I mentioned earlier. Specifically, we support the department's commitment to fixing outdated rules and regulations that have increased cost and decreased insurance policy options and coverage. And we support the intent to ultimately reverse fair plan growth so that communities can have greater access to traditional policies. We also believe that insurance plans taking into account community mitigation practices could be extremely beneficial to incentivize homeowners and landowners to adhere to updated fire protection standards instead of enforcing through fines. The Forward Party of California believes there is no one-size-fits-all solution, though, across the state, since we do have such a diverse and complex state, and the insurance market needs to reflect that with multiple approaches to help the most people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. So before wrapping up here, I'd like to spend one last brief moment reflecting on some of the policies presented today and ask each panelist, based on their understanding of what's been shared by the others, which groups here today could you imagine working with to either improve fire safety in California or to ensure our state can provide fair, accessible insurance coverage for homeowners? Please also use this time to offer any closing thoughts. And, because I unfairly gave David the floor last time, I should let Aaron start, just so, David can copy you for a change. So, Aaron, which party's policies do you feel align with the Peace and Freedom parties, and which could you imagine working with if elected to California's legislature?
Oh, I mean, if it wasn't, I'm gonna just close out a little bit. Just basically, the Peace and Freedom Party, we're a socialist political party that goes back to 1967. We were born in opposition to the Vietnam War, but also in support of the Black Liberation Movement, like the Black Panther Party. Today, we believe in many of the same things. We believe in an end to the genocide in Palestine that is paid for and pushed by our government, but also we believe into the liberation of not only Black people in our country, but the liberation of all oppressed groups in our country. And we believe we can only do this with a government that is instead run by billionaires, that is run by working everyday people. And then with working with other parties, I know the Green Party, we agree very much so on. I don't think that we would disagree on any policy. I think we would just disagree on maybe how it's implemented or at the speed or degree of. So instead of arguing if we should have healthcare, we would be arguing over which kind of national healthcare system we would have, and that would be a fun debate. So we would love to work with the Green Party. With the American Solidarity Party, I think what Mark Rizan said about there are some places that houses should not be built. In the past, indigenous people of California, they built there was houses built there that are very prone to fire, and we spend a lot of money and a lot of resources protecting those homes. Now, I it's very hard to go back and say, well, those people shouldn't return to their homes, but I think we need to plan better in the future instead of this sprawling all over the state, which more of parts of our state should be put into a state land that is protected by the state, that indigenous communities knew this area was prone to fires, and then they had controlled fires and they had vegetation and forestation that was there to prevent fires. We should look into that more. And with the Forward Party, I know that the Forward Party, we might disagree with them on a lot of things, especially they have more market-based approaches, but we can agree that we need a more proportional system so we can break the stranglehold that the California Republican parties, who are both just parties that are owned by billionaires and corporations, so that we can have more ideas on the floor and that we can have these types of debates within our state legislature. So thank you everyone for coming.
Love that. Well said, Aaron. And Sarah, we'll go to you next. Your hand is raised. Which party's policies do you feel align with the Forward parties of California's, and which could you imagine working with if elected to California's legislature?
Absolutely. So I heard a ton of overlap, which is so great. I think one thing that is really significant about the Forward Party is that we kind of just want to shift the mindset away from where do we differ and instead focus on how are we alike. I think that all of us, of course, are going to disagree on certain things, but if we're approaching it from having the importance of people over politics, I think we all are going to come to the solution that is best for the most people. and ultimately gonna address those root causes. I heard this from the Green Party addressing root causes. I heard this from the Solidarity Party addressing root causes. Heard this from Peace and Freedom Party, putting people over profit, putting people over politics. We 1,000% agree. And I really just see a lot of ways that we could work together. Specifically, we were talking about incentivizing homeowners and landowners to expand their defensible space instead of enforcing through fines. That is one thing I think that we're all agreeing on here. And we might have different approaches, but we all believe in the same idea that people come first and California comes first over profit. So I'm excited to work with you all in the future.
Thanks, Sarah. David, we'll pass to you. Which parties could you imagine working with if elected to California's legislature?
Well, when you ask it that way, it's very simple. All of them. I mean, I really want to lift up Sarah for the approach that she took about looking for opportunities to collaborate. It reminds me of my mama, that's Southern for grandmother, who raised me along with my mama. And she said, if you go looking for a difference of opinion, you know what you reckon to find? Differences of opinion. If you go looking for things that you agree on, you know what you're likely to find? Things that you agree with. So I do want to really acknowledge and lift up Sarah and the Forward Party for that basic orientation, but also her continuous reference to data-driven policies and evidence-based policy. So I just wanted to lift that part up. For Mark and the American Solidarity Party, definitely some disagreements, but where I really appreciated was the idea of, I think you call it subsidiarity. We think about it as decentralization, but the idea that at the local level is where local solutions should be applied. So in so many ways, of course, there's agreement there. I got to say, Aaron, like, again, you and I know each other already. I mean, like, if there wasn't a Green Party, I'd be in the Peace and Freedom Party. And I reckon that if there wasn't a Peace and Freedom Party, you'd be in the Green Party. So, as eco-socialists, we are absolutely in so much agreement. I did drop into the chat the Left Unity Slate, where we're actually finding ways around this really horrific voting system that we have in California to try to find ways to work together. The other thing that I want to say explicitly and unequivocally, I would work with any of these folks, including people I vehemently disagree with, to do genuine mutual aid, because I believe in the power of ordinary people to come together and do what's right for our communities. So we might have some disagreements, but at the end of the day, all of us are human beings who I genuinely and sincerely believe have the best interest of our communities at heart. And I want to point out how, even though there were disagreements, so for each one of the four parties represented, the degree of respect, genuine, deeply held conviction about the fact that we can do better than the Democratic and Republican Party. So I just want to thank both Mark and Aaron and Sarah for this conversation. And Khaled, I want to thank you for the work you're doing at the Pro-Rep Coalition.
Thank you, David, and thank you for that brilliant closing. Very happy to have you and all of you. And well, Mark, sorry, didn't forget you here. We'll close off with you. Which party's policies do you feel align with the American Solidarity parties, and which could you imagine working with if elected to California's legislature?
Well, like everybody else, I'd be willing to work with anybody if it's going to actually improve life in the state of California for people. Any two people are going to find some things that they're going to disagree about. So, like David said, let's focus on the things that we do agree about. I shared David and Aaron's critique of capitalism, while pointing out that capitalism has raised lots of people out of poverty. It's certainly not a perfect system, and but where we differ, the American Solidarity Party is not a socialist party. We are a distributist party. We believe that rather than having a small cabal of oligarchs own everything or having the government own everything, that ownership should be distributed among society as widely as possible, not just people's homes and fire risk, but also their employment, their jobs. We want to see more people own more of the economy. We think that's going to make human beings flourish the best. But we think that we're willing to work with anybody. I'd be happy to run as part of a third party slate against. Heck, I'd even work with Democrats and Republicans if they actually wanted to work with us. But they tend to ignore us, and I think maybe everybody else has that same problem. But there are other ideas out there, and I look forward to enacting proportional representation soon so that we can actually start seeing some of them and get out of the binary yes, no, true, false, red, blue, left, right dichotomy that Kaladin has been railing against.
Continuing to rail against. Well, thank you, Mark, David, Aaron, Sarah. Thank you to our attendees for tuning in today, to these four alternative parties for joining us and being a part of our coalition and supporting proportional representation and the campaign for a multi-party democracy. I hope everyone found the conversation today interesting and in particular recognize just how much these parties, despite their differences, also have in common. As David said, we're living in a moment where it feels especially easy to go looking for our differences, find them, and use them to falsely divide us. We need more opportunities like this for groups with differences to put them aside and focus on their similarities, because we have some major issues that we're facing as a state and a country. And at the end of the day, the only way we're going to solve them is by working together in an inclusive, democratic way. So thank you again for everyone for joining. If you'd like to learn more about ProRip Coalition, the campaign for proportional representation and multi-party democracy, and how all the groups here today are working together towards multi-party democracy in California, please visit our website. I'll put the link in the chat. And stay tuned for additional California Alternative Parties Respond webinars. We hope to post a few more over the course of the year. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.